If there is ever a significant size difference between you and your opponent, then you should be aware of the advantages and best strategies that each player has in order to maximize your odds. And this goes for whether you're the big guy or the small guy. In CGI 2, Dorian did something that was truly shocking. He took Felipe Pena down, mounted him, and had a very dominant performance. And this is despite the significant size discrepancy, Felipe being roughly 8 inches taller and weighing around 80 pounds more than Dorian. Most people will say that Felipe was too tired to compete, but what if I told you that this was precisely the plan? Dorian also used what is probably the best method that a smaller grappler can use to exploit their size advantage. And yes, I mean the smaller person has a size advantage. For example, the larger the human body becomes, the less efficient it is at cooling itself. This means that as Dorian and Felipe continue to move, assuming no one has a super dominant position, Felipe should naturally overheat faster and take longer to cool down. We're going to cover a brief history of Dorian Olivares, leading up to his amazing performance at CGI 2, and then we'll dive into some of the simple strategies you can use whether you're the smaller or larger grappler. You're watching BJJ Lore with Oscar, where you come to learn from the stories of your favorite grapplers and be inspired for your journey. To understand the lightning-fast rise of Dorian Olivares, you have to understand the environment that forged him. His father, Mike Olivares, a jiu-jitsu black belt, started teaching Dorian the fundamentals of grappling when he was just 6 years old. By age 10, his parents homeschooled him, allowing him to train even more. His mom dialed in his nutrition, while his dad oversaw the schedule specialized for training wrestling and no-gi jiu-jitsu, ranking in the top 100 high school wrestlers in the country while winning IBJJF no-gi world medals. When he stepped onto the professional BJJ mats, traditional guard pullers told him to slow down. But Dorian realized that if he could fuse his wrestling pressure with submission mechanics, he could succeed against most grapplers. He made his way to Austin, Texas to train with many of the world's best grapplers. Imagine being a teenager sharing a mat with Gordon Ryan, Giancarlo Bodoni, and the lion killer Gary Tonon. It's an environment where weakness is immediately exposed during rolling. While training at New Wave, Dorian stopped trying just to win gym rounds and focused entirely on systematic control. If he took your back, it was because he systematically limited your defensive options. Danaher would go on to promote Dorian to black belt in early 2025. But let's rewind to the year 2023. The setting is the ADCC East Coast Trials. Hundreds of hungry athletes enter the 66 kilogram division. It's a bracket filled with seasoned black belts and icons of the sport. Nobody outside of the hardcore Texas scene knew just how dangerous this 18-year-old kid was. They thought he was just another tough wrestler who would gas out or get caught in a leg lock. They were dead wrong. The moment his opponents tried to match his intensity on the feet, he changed levels with a speed that looked like it was in fast forward. When the fight hit the ground, veterans tried to play modern guards against him. Looking to entangle his legs, Dorian completely shut it down. His hips were heavy and his pace was absolutely suffocating. By the time he reached the finals and secured his ticket to the World Championships, the entire grappling community had a collective realization of who Dorian was. In 2025 at CGI 2, Dorian did the unthinkable against grapplers significantly larger than him. And not just 20 pounds heavier, more like 80 pounds heavier, and world class as well. Felipe Pena has even given Gordon a close match in the past, so when Dorian was chosen to fight him, it would have been a massive success if he could just survive without getting submitted. In this tournament format, that was the strategy. Everyone was watching to see if Dorian could survive the time in the pit without getting submitted. Instead, Dorian just took Felipe down and worked him. He worked his outside passing, got on top of Felipe, and wore him out. It was absolutely impressive to watch. On day one of CGI 2, Dorian did something similar to a great leg lock specialist named Taylor Pierman, and Pierman also outweighed him by about 50 pounds. So how does a 66 kilogram athlete systematically dismantle elite super heavyweights? I thought about this and wondered, does being smaller somehow help you have better cardio? It turns out it does. I knew there had to be some advantage to being smaller, and this is a crucial one. Fair warning, I'm keeping some of the scientific jargon in this script, but I'm going to do my best to simplify it while staying accurate at the same time. First, we have the engine problem. When a person's body weight doubles, their heart and lungs do not scale proportionally to sustain that mass. While basal metabolic rate, or BMR, scales to mass to the power of 0.75, the maximum metabolic rate, MMR, scales to approximately 0.90. This means that relative maximal oxygen consumption, your VO2 max, drastically drops as an athlete gets larger. The heavyweight is essentially a monster truck running on a standard sedan's fuel pump. Another simple way to put it is that as the body gets larger, the heart and lungs have a harder time getting oxygen to the cells for explosive movements and scrambles. So if you're a larger person, you want to minimize the amount of scrambles you engage in, and be aware that every time you both scramble, you're giving the smaller guy what he needs to beat you. And obviously, if you're the smaller grappler, then you want to engage in scrambles and you want to keep this bigger guy moving. And I bet this makes sense to you because it does to me. In my experience, the grapplers I really hate going against are the super fast smaller guys that never stop moving and keep coming at you relentlessly. And it feels like you just can't keep up with them. Additionally, know that as a smaller grappler, it takes less energy for you to frame or move your body overall. So even if there is not a scramble, assuming neither of you are neglecting cardio training, the smaller guy's body is equipped to go significantly longer. The obvious advantage of the larger grappler is that he will be stronger and can make the smaller guy carry his weight. So the larger grappler should try to finish the match as soon as he can, or he can get on top of the smaller grappler to make them carry his weight. Because of the size discrepancy, the smaller guy's body is not as efficient at bearing large amounts of weight, and so this will drain their gas tank much faster over time. Second major advantage for smaller people is the squeeze tax. During intense isometric holds, a larger grappler's muscle tissue contracts with immense force. This massive pressure mechanically occludes local blood vessels, shutting off the oxygen supply. Deprived of oxygen, the heavyweight's muscles must rely entirely on anaerobic glycolysis, causing them to rapidly flood with lactic acid, pump out, and lock up. In other words, when we go for a submission, we often stop our own blood vessels from delivering nutrients to the cells. This forces our body to go into anaerobic metabolism, which feels like it does when you go for a sprint. You can literally feel the lactic acid, if you know what I'm talking about. Well, this is even worse if you are larger. Something simple you can do is to avoid really insisting on a submission if it's not there, because you will fatigue faster. The third major advantage of a smaller person is the square cube law of thermodynamics. This is what I touched on in the beginning of this video. Large bodies generate metabolic heat as a function of their volume, but they can only dissipate that heat through their skin surface area. A 66 kilogram lightweight has a massive surface area to mass ratio, allowing them to sweat and cool down rapidly. A super heavyweight lacks the relative surface area to radiate heat away. Within minutes of a hard scramble, their core temperature spikes, triggering acute heat exhaustion and cognitive decline. Basically, smaller guys have a better radiator or cooling system, so it is another reason to avoid scrambles with someone much lighter than you. I do just want to take this moment to encourage you to train for cardio. It can be very healthy for you and is awesome to have for jiu-jitsu. Ideally, you want to train steady state zone 2 by doing things like cycling or jogging, and you should train a little bit for VO2 max as well. One popular method is the 4x4 method, which we'll discuss in a little bit. And now let's look into what Dorian actually does for his training. So Dorian begins his day at 5 a.m. He runs 3 miles in under 30 minutes to establish a rock-solid aerobic foundation, developing the discipline to work while his opponents are still asleep. This builds the mental resilience needed for elite competition. And to bridge the gap between running and grappling, Dorian utilizes the 4x4 high-intensity interval protocol to expand his VO2 max. This means 4 minutes of maximal effort at or above 90% max heart rate, followed by 3 minutes of active recovery, repeated 4 times. This supplemented with sprints and explosive pull-ups to build highly relaxed, explosive power. This training prevents panic. You can trust your lungs precisely when the larger man's biology begins to falter. Under strength and conditioning coach Jimmy House, Dorian's lifting split is organized as a 4-day concurrent training program. Jimmy focuses on building snap and whip. This is the coordination to stay completely relaxed and instantly produce extreme explosive force. This sort of training immensely helped Dorian. So let Dorian's discipline and effort inspire you to continue pushing yourself to accomplish things you never knew you could. At CGI 2, I ran into Dorian at the concession stands because we were both in line to buy some snacks, and I got to tell him that what he did was impressive to watch. And you know what? It's true. I never thought I would see Dorian dominate people that good and that much bigger than him. And I'm really surprised that there wasn't much more talk about it in the jiu-jitsu community because it is absolutely astonishing. It's one of those things that you think are just not supposed to happen. until somebody comes around and proves everybody wrong. Thank you for staying and watching. Let me know in the comments who you want me to make a video of, and I'll see you on the mats. And peace out.